Welcome everyone for another video on apitherapy. I want to present you two different ways of looking at beekeeping today. There's one where beekeepers aim to have a very efficient pollination. So this is really geared towards the beekeepers that bring their beehives into huge monoculture fields, and they bring the bees there so they can pollinate. For example, canola demands about 50% of all the bees of Canada just to pollinate canola fields in the prairies up north. So that's one thing, at the canola, but there's also blueberry, cranberries. There's also some orchards sometimes. These are pretty nice actually because there's a certain variety very often of food there. Other than that, it's that kind of pollination. And this is big, especially in Canada, but in most countries, I know in the States, it's huge. You know about almonds. There's a lot of video about almonds and pollination. So that's one way of thinking beekeeping. And there's another one that aims to produce good quality bee products. And now those two ways of looking at beekeeping are extremely different. One of them, the bees have to be efficient to pollinate. They have to be ready to pollinate at that specific time when the flowers are in bloom, and everything goes around that. The whole management of the beehives is all geared toward this pollination need, and that actually encourages, of course, the big monoculture way of doing the farming we do now. The way of feeding ourselves as humans. We have those huge farms that produce huge amounts. Now they're sold in those big Walmart and whatnot, all those places, and in huge amounts, and then they're distributed everywhere. And it's that kind of way of thinking, agriculture nowadays. And that kind of beekeeping goes in that line a lot. And the quality of the bee products they produce, because they still produce some bee products, very often they do produce honey, the quality of that honey will be quite questionable. Sometimes it will still be okay. Most of the time, there's very often there are pesticides in those areas. So you might find pesticides, not all the time, but you might find pesticides in those products. Also very often those bees are fed with sugar syrup. Because, they need, I don't know, a few 100,000 beehives to pollinate a huge fields of canola. And because they're really big fields. And then, so they need a lot of bees at that moment specifically. And when the canola is finished blooming, what do they do with the beehives? What do they do with the bees? They still have to eat something. So of course they won't find such a huge, generous amount of flowers. It's impossible. So of course they have to supplement them with sugar syrup, and very often some of them will give also pollen and so on. So it's not necessarily the best approach if you're looking at bee products. You see, everything is geared towards that pollination thing. It's a mindset by itself. In the meantime, that's where most of the production of honey is made, at least in Canada, but in many countries, that's how it works. Because there's so many bees doing this that they do produce some honey at some time. It might be honey produced from sugar syrup, but there will be honey produced. So that's one thing. And the other way of thinking beekeeping is about specifically the bee products. Good quality honey, fresh bee pollen, propolis, royal jelly, and other bee products. So the beekeepers that are really thinking about what bee products what can I do to get the best bee products possible, their mindset is totally different. Their management of the beehive is different. And these are really another type of beekeepers. Beekeepers, they keep the bees. They're guardians of the bees, let's say. So some guard the bees so that the bees are ready to do their work when it's time. It's kind of the pollination type of beekeeping. And the other ones, they take care of the bees. They try to make sure that the bees are in the best state possible, that they're kept really, really well, that they live really well, so that they can produce a lot of really high quality bee products, so that they can have some to share with people. And usually those beekeepers have a huge interest into apitherapy because they want high quality bee products, and that's what you need if you want to practice apitherapy. And actually, high quality bee products are so pure, so good, that you are doing apitherapy when you use them. Couldn't do otherwise, because the quality of it is so nice, it will always help you if you eat them. So you see the different ways of thinking about beekeeping. And then there's everything in between. There's people doing bee products that, sometimes they bring their bees where there's pesticide and so on. So that's an option. And there's also the ones that are doing pollination that have a certain care and a certain respect for the bees, and their products will be okay. They usually will almost never be the best quality, but they'll still, some of them will be okay. So there's all that is in between, but you have the general idea, and that describes really well why someone would have bees. It's either the pollination or the bee products. So now that this is clear, I can show you something really interesting. If you go into, of course, the mindset that really suits me, and that's where my interest is, if you're aiming about producing high quality bee products, now, since you want to do this, you don't want to bring your bees where there's pesticides. So usually you won't do pollination, except if you have huge organic farms and so on around you, but that is kind of rare. So you want to bring your bees in a natural place where there's a lot of flowers, and very rarely you'll have flowers year round. Well, year round, during the whole season of the bees, depending where you live. If you're in Canada, for example, it might be really cold, so of course you won't have flowers in January. But that being said, you still want to have flowers, in the entire bee season, let's say, when the bees are really active. So during those periods of time where there's little flowers available for the bees, you might want to think about bringing them that source of flowers. Now, you don't want to bring it from a pollination perspective, so like with a big field and pesticides and so on. You want to bring it in a more natural way. So that's an approach that I worked on a lot with two doctors in plant ecology, Jessie Loranger and Hannah Loranger. It's a wonderful couple that I really love, and actually one of them is my brother, Jessie, and they are excellent, really good at understanding how plants work together, how they can adapt to the soil they are in, what soil they need, everything the plants need to be optimal into their nectar and pollen and propolis production. Because, and especially when we're looking at the nectar production, that will vary a lot depending on the conditions the plants are in. So some plants might require a very acid or alkaline pH level in the soil, and some others will require a lot of water. Some will be still producing a lot if there's a drought, but that is quite rare. So you have to know your plants and know what you can do according to the situation where your bees are to improve their situation in a real efficient way. And this is not easy, I'm telling you. There's a lot of pollinator plant lists, but they never tell you how much that kind of plant will produce in terms of nectar, pollen, propolis. You never know. You never know the amount it will produce, and you also don't know in what condition it has to be in order to produce a lot of nectar and pollen and propolis. So that's something you need to know. And then you need to know also many tricks to make this easy as possible, as simple as possible to first plant them, make them thrive, and then keep them. And also you have to plan, a certain cycles of plants, among trees, shrubs, and annual plants and perennial plants and so on, you have to plan everything accordingly to fill that gap where the bees won't have much food. So that's a way of thinking. We call this permaculture design for bees, and that's what we developed together. And now today I will share you something very specific about that development. The plants will be needed, as I said, as a source of nectar, pollen, and propolis. But not only that, there's another option also. You know that some bees, pretty much all bees, have certain diseases. Some of them are parasites that are really bad for bees. You might have known, I've heard already about varroa mites. The varroa is really bad for bees, and it's almost everywhere. Just a few little islands don't have it. It's really rare. It's all over the place, worldwide. It's crazy. So those parasites, there's one treatment that exists for those. It's called Thymovar, and this is using thyme molecule from the plant thyme to treat the bees. So it's concentrated and you can put in the beehive, and it does work for your varroa mite infestation. Now, knowing this, if you do plant a lot of thyme where you live, well, you'll be helping your bees, because the bees will go on the thyme, will be foraging on the thyme, and as they forage, they are in contact with that molecule, and the varroa mites that are on the bee will often just let go and they will fall off, and now your bee is free of that parasite, and it's freeing the beehive like this. Now this is not a universal panacea. It's not like a miracle thing. I've never seen such a permaculture design clearing the question of varroa mites for your hives. Till now, we always still have to treat the bees with an organic treatment for varroa mites. That being said, it's still a way of helping your bees. So by your permaculture design for bees, you can actually even help their own health. This is apitherapy for the bees themselves, by planting plants that will support their need in nectar. And by the way, honey made of thyme, like thyme honey, is one of the best honey for wounds treatments and burn treatment and so on. So that could be very useful if you're aiming to produce nice apitherapy products, to have a lot of thyme around. So that's one idea. There are other plants that are known to have similar properties. I will name a few. Coriander is one of them. Mint is also good, not as powerful, but still also good. Oregano is pretty nice, and there's a few more. So that gives you some ideas of what you can do as a beekeeper to help your bees wherever they are, because that, thyme is a perennial. It will come again. All you have to do is find an easy way to plant it, to make it thrive, and then make sure it will keep going and keep growing, and if possible even spread out even more, and you just let it do what it's doing. The bees will go there, they will love it, they will help it. It's gonna be wonderful. It increases biodiversity. It's wonderful. So that's a very simple way you can help your bees increase the quality of your bee products, because as I said, thyme honey is one of the best honey for wound treatments and burn treatments. So this is just fascinating how you can take care of the health of your bees, help at least their situation, and increase your level of quality of your bee products, and increase abundance of nectar and the surrounding of your beehive. So that's one idea. There's tons of them. This is just one, just to show you how those permaculture design for bees are amazing. And by the way, it's a topic that has been worked on very little. It's not very known. It needs to be developed furthermore a lot. And so we have a team doing this. If you have any questions and so on, contact us either through the comments or through my website, of course. Contact me directly and we'll help you out with this. Again, I'm very happy to share this with you. There's a lot more behind all this. And if you want to see a little bit of an interesting point of view towards that, I can tell you that taking care of the bees like this, making sure they have abundance of food and they are thriving and they have food that will cure them, that will be a medicine for them, like we want for ourselves, like we want for all the animals, is such, it's something that is so undervalued, because bees are animals, and very often, we think about, violence against animals that are not have been treated well, and we say this is no good and all that, and we are ready to manifest for this. But in fact, for bees, we almost never do that. We never think about how well are they fed. Do we really take care of them? And the bees, they take care of they are working with very subtle things. Nectar, pollen from plants, the flower itself is one of the most subtle part of a plant. And now the nectar in the flower and the pollen on top of the flower, they're even more subtle than the flower itself. So the bees and their products are extremely subtle. They're so pure. So they work with very subtle, very high, let's say high vibration level products. They work with so subtle things. And the fact that we very rarely think about how well we take care of bees, are we really taking care well of them? That tells us that we do the same for ourselves. We do the same. The very subtle things in ourselves, we don't feed them really. That music that will feed our soul, do we really manage to hear it as often as we should? Aren't we starving sometimes at the level of our soul, of what brings us in a really, comfortable, beautiful state of mind, where we're really well and feeling plenitude and all this? Those subtle things, we don't take care of it enough, and we don't feed ourselves enough at that level. But we think more about the very urgent things, the thing that really does matter. And so you see the difference there. So that's the point, just to get us awakened about that point of view. We need to feed ourselves with very high level things. And by seeing this, we also see that the bees that do work with subtle things, we don't take care of them enough either. So that all goes together. So thank you very much for watching. And of course, please share with all your friends and so on. Thank you very much for watching. And see you another time for another Apitherapy video.